You have just killed more food than you can eat. By sunset, it has already begun to disappear, not into another animal's mouth, into the invisible mouths living all over it. For most of human history, a successful hunt came with a countdown. Meat had no label, no refrigerator, and no safe little shelf behind a glass door. In warm weather, bacteria could turn a feast into a dangerous, stinking loss within days. So, how did your ancestors stop dinner from eating itself? They used wind, smoke, bones, holes in the ground, and, in one especially strange case, they deliberately let thousands of fish go sour. Food preservation sounds like a household chore today. In prehistory, it was a technology for bending time. If food could survive after the season that produced it, then you could survive a failed hunt, a migration, a storm, or a winter when the landscape seemed empty. The ability to save meat was not just about avoiding hunger. It changed where you could travel, how long you could stay, and whether children saw the next spring. The enemy was not decay itself. Decay is a process. Bacteria and fungi break food apart, while oxygen changes fats and makes them rancid. Most of those tiny organisms need moisture, warmth, and time. Your ancestors could not see a microbe, but they could learn exactly what made it slow down. How many spoiled carcasses did that lesson cost? The simplest weapon was air. Imagine a gazelle opened with a stone blade. Thick muscles are cut into long, narrow strips, because a thin strip loses water faster than a heavy chunk. The pieces are lifted away from damp soil and spaced, where wind can reach every side. Sun adds heat, but moving dry air does the crucial work. It pulls moisture from the meat until microbes can no longer multiply easily. The result is lighter, tougher, smaller, a pile that was impossible to carry when fresh can now travel with you. When the next hunt fails, those dark strips become stored days of life. Archaeology rarely preserves the strips themselves. Dried meat was made to be eaten, and a wooden rack usually vanished long before anyone arrived with a trowel. But behavior leaves patterns. Bones are abandoned in certain combinations. Post holes form shapes beside hearths. Cut marks reveal which portions were separated and where. At Kharaneh IV in eastern Jordan, those clues converge. About 20,000 years ago, hunter-gatherers gathered there in surprisingly large numbers. Archaeologists found huge quantities of gazelle remains, hearths, and small post holes arranged around outdoor work areas. In 2019, Aimé Spirou, Lisa Mayer, Louise Martin, Danielle MacDonald, and Andrew Gerard combined the bone evidence with the layout of the site and comparisons from recent hunter-gatherer societies. Their conclusion was cautious but striking. Meat preservation through drying was practiced there, and some of the post holes may have supported a meat drying rack. Picture that rack beside the fire. Fresh strips hang above dusty ground. Hands keep them apart. Someone checks the wind and turns the pieces. Children are warned away from scavenging dogs, insects, and birds. Does that look like a primitive camp or a carefully managed food processing site? Now add smoke. Smoke is more than a flavor. A low, controlled fire warms the meat gently and coats its surface with compounds that make life harder for many bacteria and molds. The rising air also helps carry moisture away. Too much heat cooks and scorches the outside. Too little airflow traps dampness. The skill lies in holding the meat in the smoky middle, hour after hour, without burning the rack or wasting fuel. Spirou and her colleagues considered drying, smoking, salting, and sealing meat in fat when studying Kharaneh IV. The strongest site evidence supports drying, so a rack cannot tell you precisely which recipe was used on every strip. That uncertainty matters. Ancient wood, cord, skins, and food usually disappear, which means the cleverest parts of preservation are often the parts archaeology cannot recover. But one method left a much harder shell. At Qesem Cave in Israel, people living between roughly 420,000 and 200,000 years ago hunted fallow deer. They often brought selected limbs back to the cave while leaving heavier parts of the carcass behind. The long lower leg bones contained marrow, a dense package of fat and energy. Instead of cracking every bone immediately, they sometimes kept the limbs covered in skin. The bone became a container. The skin became a lid. In 2019, archaeologist Ruth Blasco led a team including Jordi Rosell, Avi Gopher, and Rand Barkai that compared ancient bones with a controlled experiment. The researchers exposed skin-covered deer bones for different lengths of time, tested the changing marrow fat, then examined the marks left when dried skin was removed. The distinctive cutting and scraping damage matched marks on bones from Qesem Cave. Their experiments found a low rate of marrow fat degradation for as long as 9 weeks under the tested conditions. 9 weeks. That is not a forgotten scrap after dinner. It is delayed consumption planned across many tomorrows. The hard bone protected the marrow while the remaining skin helped preserve the package until someone needed to crack it open. Barkai called the bones a kind of prehistoric can. What would a shelf of unopened cans look like when every can was a deer leg? This trick was strange, but logical. Exposed meat offers microbes an enormous surface to attack. Marrow locked inside an intact bone is harder to reach. Your ancestors were using an animal's own anatomy as packaging hundreds of thousands of years before metal cans existed. Still, removing water and blocking contamination were not the only options. Sometimes your ancestors recruited microbes instead of fighting them. Travel north to Norje Sunnansund on the coast of southern Sweden. About 9,200 years ago, fishers there harvested freshwater fish on a scale that produced a serious problem. A seasonal catch arrives all at once. Fish spoils quickly. Salt would solve that problem, but there was not enough salt available for the method familiar from later salted fish. So the fish went into a long, narrow pit. The structure contained an extraordinary concentration of fish bones. Archaeologist Adam Boethius analyzed the feature, compared it with traditional preservation practices, and considered what microbes would do inside it. In a 2016 study, he argued that the fish had been fermented in large quantities without salt. It remains the earliest conclusive archaeological evidence of fermentation identified so far. Fermentation is controlled takeover. Conditions are arranged so that particular microbes change the food in a useful direction before dangerous competitors destroy it. The result may smell powerful, taste sour, and look suspicious to a modern viewer. Yet, it can remain edible far beyond the life of a fresh fish. Is food rotten if the transformation is exactly the one you intended? The Norje Sunnansund fish were probably not a prehistoric version of a neat supermarket jar. The process was messy. It required judgment about temperature, time, moisture, and the construction of the pit. A failed batch could waste a season's work or make people sick. A successful one could turn a brief flood of fish into a reserve that lasted after the catch was gone. That is the counterintuitive twist. Ancient food preservation wasn't always about keeping food fresh. Freshness was often impossible. The real goal was to guide change. Drying changed soft meat into hard strips. Smoke changed its surface and flavor. Time changed. Skin covered marrow inside bone. Fermentation changed fish into something new. Your ancestors did not freeze food in an unchanging moment. They negotiated with decay. Now reconstruct one day. You stand at the edge of a camp after a mass gazelle hunt. The air is warm and flies have already found the carcasses. There is more meat on the ground than your group can finish tonight. That abundance feels like victory, but it is also an emergency. Stone blades begin moving. Some people separate joints and slice muscle thin. Others gather branches, repair racks, and feed small, smoky fires. Valuable fat is handled differently from lean flesh. Long lower leg bones are left intact, still wrapped where possible, because breaking them now would open the marrow's protective container. Every choice sends food toward a different future. Eat tonight, dry for the journey, smoke for the coming days. Keep the marrow sealed for later. Nothing requires a written recipe. Knowledge lives in hands, smells, colors, and warnings repeated beside the fire. A child learns that two strips touching each other can stay damp. A hunter learns which bones are worth carrying. An elder notices when smoke is too hot or fish has changed in the wrong way. How many generations of observation are hidden inside one preserved meal? Food storage also changed human relationships. Fresh meat encourages immediate sharing because it cannot wait. Stored food can be moved, counted, guarded, gifted, stolen, or saved for someone who is absent. A cache creates a claim on the future. It also creates a question: who controls it? Anthropologist Alain Testar argued that storage could reshape hunter-gatherer societies by allowing wealth to accumulate and resources to be controlled over time. The idea does not mean every drying rack created inequality. It means preservation had social consequences. Once food could outlive the day, decisions about ownership, obligation, and access could outlive it too. Storage also made mobility more complicated. A heavy cache ties you to a place, but portable dried meat frees you to leave it. A pit full of fermenting fish rewards returning to the same coast. A bundle of marrow bones carries energy across lean territory. The same technology could anchor a community or help it travel farther. That is why the old image of hunter-gatherers living permanently from hand to mouth is too simple. The people at Qesem Cave delayed a meal for weeks. The people at Kharaneh IV processed gazelles on a large scale. The fishers at Norje Sunnansund turned a seasonal surplus into food for later. These were not accidents at the edge of survival. They were plans. Your refrigerator performs the same ancient argument with different machinery. Lower the temperature. Slow the microbes. Buy time. A sealed package imitates the protective bone. Jerky removes water. Smoked food preserves an old alliance with fire. Yogurt, cheese, and fermented vegetables still depend on choosing helpful microbes before harmful ones take control. The difference is that modern preservation hides the work. A button creates cold. Plastic hides the smell. A printed date tells you when to worry, even if your senses disagree. Your ancestors had no date, so they read the food itself. They watched, they touched, they smelled, and they remembered what happened last time. That knowledge was never perfect. Ancient people suffered food poisoning, parasites, hunger, and catastrophic loss. Preservation did not make prehistory safe. It made uncertainty slightly more survivable. So the weirdest thing about ancient food preservation is not the sour fish, the smoky rack, or the leg bone saved like a can. It is the mind behind them. Each method required your ancestors to imagine a meal that did not exist yet, protect it from dangers they could not see, and trade effort today for survival tomorrow. You have just killed more food than you can eat. And for the first time, that does not mean it has to disappear.